Hello. Today we're going to be talking about the entity framework. Let's first start by identifying what it is. So EF is an object relational mapper that was built for .NET developers to help them work with relational data using domain-specific objects. It eliminates a lot of the work that engineers used to do in SQL, and they used to have to know quite a bit about SQL as well as knowing about their application domain and C# and coding. So this is eliminating a lot of that SQL knowledge by doing a lot of this work for us. Let's look at the three different ways in which you can use Entity Framework. Database first, model first, or code first. We're going to be focusing today on database first, and this would be a situation where you have a legacy database that you want to bring in and leverage Entity Framework's capabilities against. So we'll work on that. Next, I want to briefly talk about model first and code first. Some shops typically, when they're starting a new project, want to go into a model designer and create their models, especially if the database is complex. It's almost a necessity to do things that way. So that's available to you. There's an entity model designer that you can use to design your data model, and from that data model, the EDMX, it will generate a database for you and the classes that your application would use. The third way is called code first, and this typically is a great way if you're building small proof of concepts, or you're doing rapid application development where you're starting from scratch, you don't have an existing database, and you want to build up your model based on C# classes first. And then from those classes, Entity Framework will generate your database. So those are the three basic models that can be used. As I said, we're going to start with database first today. So let's go take a look at the data that we'll be using. So this is it's probably familiar to you if you've seen some of the earlier screencasts. We're using this positions database, which has a number of entities here and relationships between these tables. We've also got a stored procedure that we'll bring in and show you how that works in Entity Framework. So we have our database set up. It happens to be located in the Azure cloud, Microsoft Cloud. It could be located anywhere. It could be local. It's not going to really matter. We're going to be able to connect to this database in the cloud and pull down all this data through Entity Framework, which will create our models for us. So we're going to shift into Visual Studio here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and create a simple Windows presentation format, WPF application, just so we can consume this data. We could create any type app. It could be MVC. There's no limit really to the number and types of apps that can consume data through the Entity Framework. But this is just a real simple way for us to create some UI and to be able to pull that data in. So let me go ahead and create an application here. And we'll create a WPF app. We'll call this EF database first. And we'll say OK. Let that chug away and bring up the designer. OK. Now we're just going to have a simple button here we're going to click on, and that button is going to go ahead and retrieve some data and populate a list view of that data. So this will be pretty simple for us to work with. Let's go ahead and go into the XAML code here, and I think what I'm going to just do is copy in this stack panel that I created earlier to save us time, and we'll go over what's going on here. We'll get rid of this grid. Okay, so we just have resize things here. Okay, we just have a stack panel with a button in it. Let me save this. And the button is has the name of get positions. When it fires, we're going to go get the data, and we're going to bind it to the list view here. And you see I've got these bindings set up for position ID, latitude, and longitude. So let's go to the CS code And there is one method we'll need for this button. Okay, so I think we're ready to go there. So we have our application ready. We just need to be able to bring our database model in. So we need to get Entity Framework set up to build our model from our existing database. Now you typically would set up your model classes in a separate project, but for our demo purposes here, we'll just go ahead and add it to our WPF app. So we'll go ahead and add new item, and we're going to choose data, and we're going to add an entity data model here. And I think we'll just name this positions entity model. We'll go ahead and add that. Now, this workflow here, this workflow path we're going through is designer focused. So the two typical things a designer would want to do would be either pull the model from an existing database or create an empty model, in which case I would use the entity model designer to build my model and then have the entity framework create my classes and DB schema from that model. But since we're going down the database first approach here, workflow, we're going to just choose generate from database here. Select next. And let's see, we've got my Azure database already set up in here. So let's see, well, let's go ahead and do new connection. We'll go through that. Okay, so just forget about the fact that it's already set up, and we'll go back to SQL. We'll go ahead and get our connection string, pull that out of there, back here to Visual Studio, and we'll go ahead and put in our server name, and SQL Azure does not support Windows authentication. We'll switch to SQL Server authentication, and get my password here, and let's see, SQL admin, and then I'm going to go ahead and put in the password. Now what's probably occurred already is that it's gone out to the Azure database and looked to see what database names were available. Oops, looks like we've got an error here. What could be wrong? Okay, let me quickly check something. I might have the wrong admin. Bear with me 1 second here. Okay, check that. Okay, now that's correct. Well, let me try the password again here. Okay, that worked. I must have copied the password in incorrectly. So it knows about the positions database, so it's been able to connect to the server, and we'll go ahead and select that. Now let me go back. Okay, so you can see it's showing us the entity connection string. You can see that this is a connection string. I mean, it has a little more than your typical ADO.NET connection string. And if you look closely, you can actually see that it's basically an entity framework connection string which wraps up a traditional ADO.NET connection string. Because if you look at this here, you'll recognize it's a traditional ADO.NET type connection string. Let's see what else. You notice it also references the CSDL, which is our conceptual data model. These are the three parts of the entity framework that lets it map from the database to the code classes. And so our CSDL, which is our conceptual data model. Then we have our SSDL, which is our structural data model. And finally we have our MSL, which is the mapping model, which maps between the two, and they're all being defined here in this connection string. So basically the entity framework needs those models, model mappings, plus it needs the regular ADO.NET mapping to the database in order to bring in the database and do its magic here, or bring in that schema. So let's see, what else? Oh, and I also have to name this. Now this will end up being my database context, so I think I'm just going to call it positions context. And one other thing to mention is the password is stored in plain text within either the app config or web config. So it's pointing it out here and making sure I'm aware of that, and I'm okay with that. Now there is a tool, ASP.NET regis exe tool, which will go in and encrypt your passwords within your config files, and this is the best practice. So I want to point that out, but for our demo purposes here, we'll just go ahead and say yes, okay, and we'll click next. Now we could use Entity Framework 6.0. I'm going to go ahead and stick with 5 now. Now it's showing me all the entities that it could bring in, and I'm going to go ahead and take all of the tables, and that's crews, places, positions, and time zones. I'll skip the view. There is one view, but I'll skip it for now. We'll bring in the stored procedure. So we've got that. And what it's going to attempt to do is to pluralize or singularize classes based on them being English names. And it does a pretty good job, but it doesn't do a perfect job. And so there could be an issue with that. And we'll take a look at the names that it chooses. We do want foreign key relationships maintained, brought in. And we do have a stored procedure that we're going to bring in. We'll go ahead and keep positions model and get started with this. Entity framework is crunching away. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so here's our entity framework data model brought in here to the Entity Framework Designer. Let's move things around a little so it's a little easier to see. Put it way down there. There we go. So you notice right offhand that this was named cruise and it dropped the E. We can go in and just edit this right away and correct that problem. And I notice there is a foreign key back here, cruise, back to the cruise. This cruise ID is a foreign key back to the cruise table. So let's change that to cruise with an E. I think we're okay. You notice there's a one-to-many relationship between cruise and positions. And then there's a, looks like a nullable, time zone ID is nullables. Okay, so it can have none or one relationship there. So let's see, then we've got place is the same. Okay. Now, we can go, let's hang on a second here. Excuse me. So we haven't actually created our model yet. Let's go ahead and do that. As soon as we do our build, we'll actually have the classes showing up. If everything goes well. Build started. Now it's bringing in that database. Look, build succeeded, so everything went well. We can go ahead and take a look at what we have here. Okay, so here are the classes it created. It created a cruise class. And you notice one thing here is the cruise class has a collection of positions. And we saw that in the entity designer here. Cruise has a collection of positions right here. Now if we go to positions, we'll see there are a collection of cruises, places, and time zones. So let's go to position, and you see them represented right here. And one thing to note, the virtual keyword is allowing us to utilize the lazy loading on these classes, so they won't get loaded if not needed. So when we pull in a position, it won't necessarily load all of these collections, because that would be very wasteful if we weren't intending to actually use them. So it'll wait until they are actually used in the code before it would pull them in. So let's see what else. So now we want to start using the model. Okay, so let's go ahead and close these windows, close everything out here, and I want to go back to my code here, and I want to start using this data. So we do that through the positions context, which has all our DB sets, and maybe we should take a quick look at that. Here we go. Here's the positions context, and you'll notice since we're doing database first, this is on model creating. The model shouldn't be created while our application is running. Because of DB first, it was created ahead of time when we did our build. So if this were to fire, we'd get an unintentional code first exception. Here are our DB sets that we talked about, and we'll be utilizing the positions DB set. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is going to get fired right here when we click the button. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to have access to that positions context. Now, typically in an application, you would not reference the context directly here. You would have you'd be using the repository data pattern, and but in a demo situation, we can't be doing everything. These demos would take way too long. So we're going to go ahead and create this context right away, and we'll say new positions context, and then we'll say var positions, and here we bring in our entity framework. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we're going to say from p in ctx positions. Okay. And we just want positions here, and then where p dot cruise. Cruise ID. What's going on here? Let me build. Okay, hang on a second. Let's see, from P in. There we go. Okay, that's what was happening there, I believe. Oh, okay. There we go. So we're going to only pull those records with cruise ID of 1, and we're going to order by p.reported at, and then we're going to select p, and we'll just go ahead and take 5 records. Okay, so I don't know why I keep smiling. Okay, there we go, P. So then the only other thing we need to do, if we ran this now, I'm even forgetting to add the E there, reported at. Okay, now let's see, we need to be able to set the item source of the positions list. Positions list. There we go. Item source equal to positions dot to list. We have to turn it into a list collection in order for the in order for this to work. So let's see, I think we're ready to run. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. We click positions, and it worked. Yeah. And so we've got our longitude and latitudes for those 5 positions we took. So you can see this is really an improvement compared to the work we would have had to do to bring, to connect with SQL and load all this data in. I didn't have to write any SQL code at all. Link does a huge amount of work for us. So I think this has demonstrated that. I hope you've enjoyed this brief look at the entity framework, specifically focusing on the database first approach. In subsequent screencasts, we'll look at model first and we'll look at code first. So that's it for today. Take care. Bye now.